The marble hall of Harvard's International Business Pavilion shimmered with confidence. Rows of sharply dressed students, global investors, and media teams filled the seats. The air buzzed with ambition, the kind that smelled like perfume and pressure. It was the final round of the Global Entrepreneurship Challenge, a prestigious pitch competition where elite students presented startup ideas to real investors. Winning meant funding, fame, and doors that normally stayed locked. At the judges' table sat Thomas Whitmore, a silver-haired venture capitalist from Los Angeles. Known for his sharp tongue and even sharper ego. He'd built billion-dollar companies and loved reminding everyone of it. Beside him sat Professor Lin, a quiet but brilliant economics scholar from Beijing, and Alina Whitmore, Thomas's daughter, a Harvard senior, who had inherited her father's arrogance like a family heirloom. Backstage, Maya Thompson, a 20-year-old black student from Atlanta, stood nervously clutching her notecards. Her mother, Angela, the university's cleaning supervisor, had managed to sneak into the back row. Still in her work uniform, her face glowing with pride. Maya wasn't from the same world as the others. Her mother had raised her alone. Cleaning lecture halls where students like Alina took notes on tablets worth more than their monthly rent. Still, Maya had earned her place here, not through connections, but through brilliance. Her project, Bridge Lingua, was a cross-cultural translation startup that used AI to help students learn languages through real-world interaction. But none of that mattered to people like Thomas Whitmore. When Maya's name was announced, whispers rippled through the hall. She stepped up to the podium, heels clicking softly, trying to steady her shaking hands. Thomas leaned toward Alina. "This should be interesting," he muttered. "Didn't know Harvard was accepting janitors' kids now." Alina smirked. She probably got in on a diversity quota. Professor Lin frowned, but said nothing. Maya began her presentation, voice calm but trembling slightly. "Good evening. My name is Maya Thompson, and my project, Bridge Lingua, focuses on bridging global communication through adaptive translation." She clicked her first slide, a clean, minimalist design with data charts. But Thomas wasn't watching the screen. He was watching her. "Tell me, Miss Thompson," he interrupted loudly, "how do you plan to build a translation company when you can't even pronounce lingua correctly?" Laughter erupted from a few students. Maya froze. Thomas leaned back, smirking. "Translation is a global market. To build credibility, you need cultural fluency. You speak any other languages, Miss Thompson?" Her throat tightened. I'm learning Mandarin, sir." Elena chuckled. "Mandarin. Oh, how adorable." The laughter spread again, quiet, cruel, echoing through the hall. Angela, sitting at the back, clutched her hands together, whispering, "Just breathe, baby, just breathe." Professor Lin cleared his throat. Perhaps we should allow her to continue. But Thomas wasn't finished. No, this could be fun. He turned to Professor Lin with a smug grin. "How about a challenge? If this young lady can translate even a single sentence, I say in Mandarin, I'll give her mother my job as my company's housekeeper." A hush fell over the room. Maya's face burned. She opened her mouth to speak, but the words tangled in her throat. Angela stood halfway. Trembling, "Sir, that's Thomas," raised a hand. "Relax, ma'am, it's just a joke." But no one was laughing now. Professor Lin shot him a disapproving glance. "Mr. Whitmore, that's unprofessional." "Oh, come on," Thomas said lightly. "If she's as smart as she claims, let her prove it." The entire hall waited. Cameras turned toward the stage. Students leaned in. Maya's eyes flicked to her mother, tears forming, pride flickering. Then, she turned back to Thomas, her fear fading into something stronger. "All right," she said softly. "Say your sentence." Thomas smirked, glancing at Professor Lin. "Fine." Then, with exaggerated tone, he said in Mandarin, 这些人不属于我们的世界. Jexi ren bu shuyu w men de shuji. These people don't belong in our world. Gasps rippled through the room. Maya's eyes narrowed. For a moment, she stood still. Then, her voice rang out clear, confident, fluent. 这些话只显示出你的小气，而不是你的智慧. busha ni the jihwe. Jexi, were j shonchu, aghoa shi, bush k, nida shahu. Those words reveal your smallness, not your intelligence. The silence that followed was electric. Every head turned toward her. Even Professor Lin's mouth parted slightly in astonishment. Maya held her ground. Chin high, the microphone trembling in her hand, but her voice was unshaken. "I may not come from your world, Mr. Whitmore," she said in English. "But that doesn't mean I can't speak its language." For the first time that night, Thomas Whitmore didn't have a comeback. Angela's eyes filled with tears. The audience began to murmur, admiration replacing mockery. Professor Lin broke into a small smile, the kind that said, "I knew it," and Maya. She didn't need applause, her dignity spoke louder than any round of clapping ever could. The room stayed frozen long after Maya finished speaking. You could have heard a pin drop in the grand Harvard auditorium. Dozens of eyes, professors, students, investors, all stared at her. This wasn't just about a translation anymore. This was about power, and she had just shifted it. Thomas Whitmore blinked, his smirk faltering. The color drained slightly from his face as whispers rippled through the crowd. What did she just say? A student muttered. Professor Lin adjusted his glasses, his eyes bright with something like pride. She said, he translated calmly, that Mr. Whitmore's words show smallness, not wisdom. Gasps followed. Maya stood tall, her heart pounding, every nerve alive, but she didn't flinch. Angela, her mother, pressed her hand to her mouth at the back of the room, tears spilling silently. She'd seen her daughter face cruel remarks before, in stores, in schools, in life, but never had Maya stood so visibly, so fearlessly, before the world that always told her she didn't belong. Thomas chuckled, trying to shake off the sting. "Cute," he said. "Memorized a few phrases from a YouTube video, did you?" Professor Lin's eyes narrowed. "Mr. Whitmore, that was not beginner-level Mandarin." Thomas ignored him, straightening his suit. "Let's get back to the pitch, shall we? This isn't a language exam." But the audience wasn't ready to move on. Something had shifted in the air. One of the student judges raised a hand. "Actually, I think we'd like to hear her finish." Without interruption this time, applause broke out, small at first, then growing. As more students and even a few professors clapped, Thomas's jaw tightened. He leaned toward Alina, muttering, "These people love an underdog show, don't they?" Alina smirked faintly, but the confidence in her eyes had dimmed. Maya clicked her next slide, her voice steadier now. "As I was saying, Bridgelingua connects cultures through intelligent translation. But more than that, it's about empathy. It's about giving people the confidence to communicate beyond barriers." The words rolled out naturally, no longer forced. The crowd was listening, truly listening. She gestured toward her screen, where an animated interface displayed real-time AI conversation tools. Our technology adapts to the user's language level and cultural tone. It's not just about words, it's about understanding. Professor Lin leaned forward, genuinely impressed. "Remarkable," he whispered. When Maya finished, the applause was loud, genuine, heartfelt. But not everyone was clapping. Thomas leaned into his microphone. "Well," he said dryly, "you've got the crowd's sympathy, I'll give you that." Maya blinked. "Sympathy, sir?" He smiled thinly. "You think this is about innovation? But this is about business. You really think investors will put millions into a student-run language app just because you made them feel good for 5 minutes?" A hush fell again. Alina smirked, whispering, "He's right. No one's funding that." But Maya didn't waver. Instead, she smiled faintly. "With respect, sir, they'll invest because I understand the problem better than anyone here." Thomas frowned. "And why is that?" "Because," Maya said, her tone calm but piercing, "I've lived it. I grew up translating for my mum since I was 6. Not languages, lives. I learned how to explain bills, hospital letters, and policies to people who didn't think we belonged in those offices. That's what Bridgelingua was born from. It's not an app. It's experience turned into action." The audience erupted in applause again, louder. Longer? Even Professor Lin clapped softly, his expression filled with admiration. Alina crossed her arms, whispering, "She's just playing the sob story." But Thomas wasn't smiling anymore. His fingers drummed on the table, his jaw set. After the presentations ended, students gathered in clusters. Some congratulated Maya, others stared in awe. A reporter from the campus magazine approached. "Miss Thompson, that was incredible. How long have you been studying Mandarin?" Maya smiled humbly. 2 years. I taught myself after I met Professor Lin at a cultural exchange workshop. 2 years. The reporter said, astonished. You spoke like a native. Angela, watching from behind the curtains, wiped her tears with the sleeve of her uniform. Her heart swelled with pride, not just for her daughter's intelligence, but for her courage to face those who thought kindness and humility meant weakness. Thomas stormed out of the auditorium before the results were even announced. Alina followed close behind, fuming. "She humiliated you in front of everyone, Dad." Thomas's voice was low. "She got lucky." "No," Professor Lin said behind him, having overheard. His tone was calm but firm. "She was prepared. You were not." Thomas turned, his face tight. "You think she's some prodigy?" "I think," Lin said, "she represents the kind of intelligence money can't buy, and arrogance will never understand." He walked past them, leaving Thomas standing in the hallway, silent for the first time all evening. That night, Maya returned to her dorm, the adrenaline fading. She sat on her bed, staring at the Harvard crest on her notebook, toward her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number, unknown, impressive performance today. "Let's talk business, Professor Lin," she smiled, heart-fluttering. But as she turned off the light, another thought crept in. She knew people like Thomas didn't lose quietly, and tomorrow, she'd find out just how far a wounded ego could go. The next morning, the Harvard campus buzzed with talk of one thing. Maya Thompson. By noon, videos from the pitch event had gone viral. The clip of her translating Thomas Whitmore's Mandarin insult had racked up over 2 million views overnight. Captions flooded social media. Black Harvard student silences racist investor in fluent Mandarin. The janitor's daughter outsmarts a billionaire. Some called her brave, others called her an inspiration, but for Thomas Whitmore, it was humiliation. He sat in the lounge of his penthouse suite at the Charles Hotel, scrolling through the viral clip, jaw clenched so tight his teeth hurt. Each replay of her confident voice, that flawless Mandarin, made his skin burn hotter. Alina stood by the window, arms crossed. "Dad, you need to make a statement. The press is eating you alive." Thomas threw his phone onto the table. "A statement? About what?" "A spoiled student who got lucky." Alina frowned. "She didn't get lucky, Dad. She'd beat you fair and square." "Don't you start," he snapped. "You think one clever line makes her a genius? I've been building companies since before she was born. I'm not letting a student ruin my reputation." He poured himself a drink, hand trembling slightly. "These people think they've found a hero. Let's see how long that lasts when they realized she plagiarized her idea like the rest of them." Alina blinked. "You think she cheated?" Thomas smirked. "I know she did." He turned to his laptop, typing furiously. "Let's find out who helped her. Because no girl like that pulls off a presentation like that without someone feeding her lines." Meanwhile, across campus, Maya was sitting with Professor Lin in his small but elegant office. Sunlight spilled through tall windows lined with potted bamboo plants. "Congratulations," Lin said with a warm smile. "You've caused quite the sensation." Maya laughed softly, shaking her head. "I didn't mean to. I just didn't want to stay silent." Lin nodded. "You didn't. And that's what made it powerful." He slid a folder across the desk. "Harvard's Innovation Council wants to shortlist Bridgelingua for funding. I'll mentor you through the proposal." Maya's eyes widened. "Sir, that's incredible," he smiled. "You earned it." Then, his expression grew thoughtful. "But be cautious. Men like Thomas Whitmore don't handle public embarrassment gracefully." She exhaled. "I know, I could see it in his eyes. Lin's voice lowered. He may try to discredit you. If that happens, you don't fight him with anger. You fight him with evidence, with truth. Maya nodded slowly. Yes, sir. By evening, Thomas had already contacted 2 tech journalists he'd bribed in the past. I want an expose, he said over the phone. This so-called prodigy, find out where she got her data, her funding, everything. Mr. Whitmore, one of them hesitated. Word is, she's working directly with Professor Lin. That's a respected name. Thomas smirked. Then I'll make sure his name goes down with hers. He ended the call and looked at Alina. Watch how fast they turn on her when I show the world she's a fraud. Alina hesitated. Are you sure this is the right move? He poured another drink. Sweetheart, in business, you don't win by being right. You win by being louder. The next day, a headline appeared on a low-tier business blog. Students winning pitch under scrutiny. Bridgelingua concept, not original. The article claimed that parts of Maya's project had similarities with an old Chinese startup. It was filled with vague quotes and anonymous sources. Within hours, the post spread like wildfire. At the cafeteria, Maya's classmates whispered as she walked by. Some avoided her eyes. Others pulled out their phones. Scrolling through the accusations, Angela found her daughter sitting alone on a campus bench, staring blankly at her phone screen. They're saying I stole my idea, Maya whispered. That I cheated. Angela sat beside her, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. And do you know the truth? Maya nodded, tears stinging her eyes. Of course I do. Then let them talk, Angela said softly. Because lies are loud, baby. But truth echoes longer. That evening, Professor Lin called her into his office again. Don't worry, he said gently. I've seen the article. It's flimsy. No credible publication will touch it. But Thomas wasn't done. He arranged a live-streamed business integrity panel. The next day, supposedly about ethics in entrepreneurship, and made sure Maya was invited. When she arrived, she realized too late it wasn't a discussion. It was an ambush. Thomas smiled from his seat on stage. Ah, Miss Thompson, he said into the mic. So glad you could join us. I thought this would be the perfect opportunity for you to clear your name publicly. You don't mind, do you? The audience murmured in confusion. Cameras rolled. Maya stood frozen, every instinct screaming to run. But then she saw her mother sitting quietly in the back, nodding at her. A silent reminder of who she was. So Maya took a breath and sat down. Go ahead, Mr. Whitmore, she said evenly. Ask your questions. Thomas leaned forward, his grin sharp. Oh, I will. And as he prepared to humiliate her a second time, he had no idea that this time, it would be his voice that got recorded, and his downfall that would go viral. The auditorium lights glared bright and hot. Cameras lined the back wall. Red recording dots glowing like judgmental eyes. Dozens of students, professors, and journalists filled the seats, all curious to witness Harvard's business integrity panel. Only a handful knew what was really going on. Center stage. Thomas Whitmore adjusted his tie, a smug grin plastered across his face. He looked like a man in control, the calm before the storm he thought he was about to unleash. Beside him sat Maya Thompson, the only student on the panel, poised but visibly tense. She wore a simple navy blazer, the same one her mother had saved up to buy her last semester, and sat with her back straight. Eyes forward, Professor Lin was in the front row, his expression unreadable. Angela, sitting just a few seats away, clutched her daughter's lucky pen in her hand like a prayer. Thomas leaned toward the mic. Welcome everyone, he said smoothly. Tonight, we're discussing integrity, how truth and transparency are essential in business. He paused dramatically, glancing at Maya, especially. For those just starting their careers, soft laughter rippled through a few audience members who'd read the online rumors. Maya's hands tightened in her lap. Thomas continued. Now, Miss Thompson, there have been questions regarding the originality of your project, Bridgelingua. Some say it bears striking similarities to a 2015 Chinese startup called Lingtalk. Care to comment? Maya took a steady breath. Yes, sir. I'm aware of that company. It was one of the research case studies I cited in my paper. My project doesn't copy it, it expands on it, using adaptive AI that analyzes cultural tone and context. That's a major difference. Thomas smirked. Convenient explanation. He turned toward the audience. You see, ladies and gentlemen, plagiarism isn't just about copying code, it's about copying ideas. And sometimes, people wrap those stolen ideas in emotional stories to hide the truth. A few gasps. A few nods. The trap was set. Thomas leaned closer. Tell me, Miss Thompson, do you really expect us to believe you? A janitor's daughter created something that entire tech firms couldn't perfect. The words hit like a slap. Maya froze for a second, blinking back the sting. The microphone amplified her breathing. Angela's eyes filled with tears. Don't let him take your voice, baby, she whispered under her breath. Then, slowly, Maya raised her chin. With all due respect, Mr. Whitmore, she said softly, it's not my background you should question, it's your assumptions. The crowd murmured. Thomas frowned. Excuse me. Maya's tone grew stronger. You keep talking about integrity, but integrity isn't about money or last names. It's about honesty. And from what I can see, the only dishonesty here is the way you twist people's worth to fit your comfort. A ripple of applause spread through the room, quiet at first, then louder. Thomas's smile faltered. You're getting emotional, Miss Thompson. That's not very professional. She smiled faintly. I'm not emotional, sir. I'm just fluent in truth. That line hit the air like thunder. Even Professor Lin's usually calm expression broke into a grin. But then, Thomas made his fatal mistake in a flash of arrogance. He leaned into his mic, muttering under his breath, thinking it was off. These people always play the victim card. That's their only talent. The room froze. The words echoed through the speakers, loud, clear, undeniable. Maya's breath caught. Angela gasped audibly. Professor Lin shot to his feet. Thomas's face drained of color. Wait, I didn't. The mic, but it was too late. Every phone in the room had captured it. The journalists in the front row were already typing furiously. Maya sat still, eyes calm but heart racing. She didn't need to say anything. The silence said it all. Professor Lin turned to the moderator. I think we've just witnessed the true definition of integrity, or lack thereof. The crowd erupted in murmurs, some angry, some stunned. Maya finally spoke, her voice low but firm. You asked if I could prove I built my idea with integrity, Mr. Whitmore. I just did. I didn't have to expose you. You exposed yourself. And with that, she stood. The audience rose in applause, not just polite clapping, but thunderous emotional applause that shook the hall. Angela stood to, tears streaming down her face, clapping harder than anyone. Thomas tried to speak, but the moderator's mic was already off. Security approached quietly to escort him backstage, not because he was dangerous, but because his reputation now was dot by that night. Clips of his remark had flooded every platform. Hashtags trended globally. Hashtag the mic didn't lie. Hash Maya speaks truth. Hash Bridgelinguin's Thomas's PR team tried to release a statement, but the internet wasn't buying it. Within 48 hours, his company's stock dropped by 22%. Major partners announced they were re-evaluating relationships. The world didn't cancel him. He canceled himself with one sentence. Meanwhile, Maya sat in her dorm, watching the flood of messages pour in. Journalists, investors, even major tech firms wanted to meet her. She looked over at her mum, sitting on her bed with a tired but radiant smile. You proud of me, Mama? Angela smiled through tears. Baby, I've always been proud, but tonight, the world finally saw why. By sunrise, the video had already crossed 12 million views. Clips of Thomas Whitmore's live mic, remark, dominated every social media feed. Hashtags burned across Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. Hash, she spoke truth. Hash, the mic didn't lie. Hash Bridgelingua news anchors replayed the moment over and over. The same sentence that once mocked Maya now haunted Thomas, the sentence that ended decades of unchecked arrogance. For Maya, it didn't feel real. She sat in her dorm room, phone buzzing non-stop texts, interview requests. Sponsorship offers. Angela peeked in, holding 2 mugs of coffee. You're trending in 32 countries, baby. Maya exhaled, dazed. I didn't even want to trend in one. Angela chuckled softly. Sometimes, the truth doesn't ask permission to be heard. Meanwhile, on the 32nd floor of Whitmore Capital, chaos reigned. Thomas stood at the window of his corner office, staring out at the gray Boston skyline. His phone wouldn't stop ringing. Investors, partners, PR managers, all saying the same thing. Step down before you sink the company. Alina sat quietly across from him, pale and shaken. Dad, they've frozen your accounts in Singapore. The board's calling an emergency vote tonight. Thomas turned sharply. I built this empire. Do they think a viral video erases that? She didn't answer. He slammed his fist on the desk. It was a joke. Everyone's too damn sensitive these days. Alina flinched. Maybe it wasn't a joke to her dad. He froze. The look in her eyes, disappointment, not anger, cut deeper than the headlines ever could. For the first time, Thomas Whitmore realized the laughter he'd once used as armor had become his undoing. Back on campus, Maya walked across Harvard Yard, cameras flashing as she passed. Some students smiled, others whispered. Fame had changed the air around her. Professor Lin met her near the steps of the Kennedy Building, his calm smile grounding her. Congratulations, Miss Thompson, he said warmly. You've done what most people never could, change a conversation. Maya sighed. It feels strange, sir. Everyone's calling me a hero, but I just spoke up, he nodded. That's what heroes do. They speak when silence is safer. She looked up. Do you think I did the right thing? I didn't mean for him to lose everything. Lin placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. You didn't take anything from him. His words did. You just let the truth echo. That evening, the Harvard auditorium, the same place where it all began, filled again. This time for the Bridge Lingua recognition ceremony. The dean stood at the podium. Today, we honor a student whose courage and intellect remind us that education means more than degrees, it means integrity. Applause thundered. Maya walked on stage, heart racing. The same nervous girl who once trembled under mockery, now standing tall under admiration. She spotted her mother in the front row, eyes glistening with pride. Professor Lin presented her with a plaque for exemplary innovation and cultural leadership. Maya Thompson, when she spoke, her voice was steady, humble. I never planned to make headlines. I just wanted to build something that made people feel seen. But if this moment taught me anything, it's that respect should never depend on power, only on character. The hall stood as one. Across town, Thomas Whitmore sat alone in his penthouse, the lights dim. The sound of applause from the live stream echoed faintly through his phone. He scrolled through the comments, angry faces, disappointed investors, strangers, demanding accountability. Then, a quieter comment caught his eye. Sometimes you lose everything so you can finally see what matters. He set the phone down and stared into the dark city beyond his window. For the first time in years, he didn't reach for a drink or a defense. He just sat and listened. Later that night, Maya returned to her dorm and found dozens of handwritten letters slipped under her door from janitors, cafeteria workers, and students she'd never met. One note read, "My daughter's in middle school. She watched your video and started learning Mandarin tonight." Another said, "I clean offices for a living. Seeing your mother in that audience made me proud to be seen." Maya held each letter like gold. Angela smiled, brushing her daughter's hair back gently. You see, baby. You didn't just win an argument. You gave people a reason to believe again. Maya nodded softly. Then, I guess we both did, Mama. By the week's end, Bridge Lingua received offers from 3 major investors, not because of pity, but because of purpose. Maya accepted one under a single condition. That part of the profits fund scholarships for first-generation students and single parents. When the contract was signed, she emailed the last person she never expected to contact, Thomas Whitmore. Dear Mr. Whitmore, I hope you're healing. I meant what I said. Integrity isn't about power. It's about truth. If you ever wish to support something meaningful, my company is opening a mentorship program for students who've been overlooked. You're welcome to contribute. Respectfully, Maya Thompson. She didn't expect a reply, but sending it felt right, because grace wasn't weakness. It was strength under control. 3 months later, the Harvard campus was in full bloom. Cherry blossoms framed the stone arches, and sunlight poured through the courtyard like forgiveness made visible. For most students, life had returned to normal. But for Maya Thompson, nothing was quite the same. She was now the CEO of BridgeLingua, Inc., working out of a small startup office donated by the university's innovation program that the company had just hired its 5th employee, all students from underrepresented backgrounds. The logo, a glowing bridge made of letters from different languages, shone proudly on the office glass. Yet, even with the success, Maya stayed grounded. Every morning, her mother still woke early to clean classrooms, humming gospel songs under her breath. Every evening she stopped by Maya's office to drop off dinner. Fame fades, Angela said one night as she set down a home-cooked meal. But legacy, that's forever, baby. Maya smiled. Then we'll build both. Across town, Thomas Whitmore's world looked very different. The man who once commanded boardrooms now lived in quiet anonymity. After the scandal, his company forced him to resign. Most of his assets had been liquidated to settle lawsuits and penalties. He sold the penthouse and moved into a modest condo near the harbor. No assistants, no luxury cars, no cameras. At first, the silence was unbearable. The world that had applauded him for his arrogance now ignored him completely. But silence, like truth, has a way of teaching. He began volunteering at a local business mentorship program, mostly to fill time. The irony wasn't lost on him. The man accused of arrogance, now teaching humility. One day, during a workshop, a young immigrant entrepreneur nervously stumbled through her pitch in broken English. Thomas stopped her gently. "It's okay," he said, his voice quieter than it had been in years. "Take your time. What you're saying matters more than how you say it." The girl smiled, grateful. For the first time in a long time, Thomas didn't feel powerful, he felt human. Back at Harvard, Maya received an unexpected email from Thomas Whitmore. Subject: "An apology I should have given sooner, Miss Thompson. I won't make excuses. I said things that revealed more about my ignorance than your worth. Watching the fallout taught me what arrogance hides: fear of being replaced, of being wrong, of losing control. You didn't destroy my career. I did that myself. But you gave me something I never had the courage to find: perspective. If you'll allow it, I'd like to contribute to your scholarship fund anonymously. No recognition, just redemption. Sincerely, Thomas Whitmore." Maya read it twice. The first time in disbelief, the second time in silence. Then she called her mother, "Mama." He apologized. Angela's voice softened on the other end. "That's good, baby. That means he's finally learning." Maya hesitated. "Should I accept it?" Angela didn't answer immediately. Sometimes forgiveness isn't about saying it's okay. It's about setting yourself free. Maya nodded. "Then, I guess I'll forgive him." Weeks later, at the annual Harvard Innovation Symposium, Maya was invited as a keynote speaker. The theme: Building Bridges in a Divided World. The hall was packed. Students, investors, journalists. But among the crowd, Maya noticed a familiar figure sitting quietly in the last row. Thomas Whitmore. No cameras pointed at him. No bodyguards, no attention. Just a man sitting alone, listening. When she took the stage, Maya paused for a moment, then smiled. 3 months ago, she began, I learned something powerful, that dignity doesn't require an audience. And forgiveness doesn't erase the past. It redefines it. She looked directly toward the back row. Sometimes, people hurt you not because they see you as less, but because they've forgotten how to see anyone as equal. But when they finally do, that's when change begins. The room fell silent, and Thomas lowered his head. After the speech, As the audience erupted into applause, Thomas quietly approached the stage. "Maya," he said softly, stopping a few feet away. "You didn't have to mention me," she smiled. "I wasn't talking about you. I was talking about all of us." He nodded, eyes glistening. "For what it's worth, thank you. For the chance to listen." Maya extended her hand. "Then use it well." He shook her hand, a gesture simple yet profound, bridging the distance between pride and humility. That evening, Thomas transferred a large anonymous donation to the Bridge Lingua Scholarship Fund. The university later used it to support immigrant and low students pursuing linguistics and technology. No one knew who the donor was, no one needed to, because the greatest acts of redemption don't need an audience, and for Thomas Whitmore, that anonymity was his peace. That night, Maya walked through Harvard Yard beneath the soft glow of streetlights. Her phone buzzed with a news alert. Bridge Lingua partners with Global Education Network to launch cross-cultural learning labs. She smiled and looked up at the stars. "I did it, Mama," she whispered. Angela's words echoed in her memory. Fame fades, legacy lasts. And now, both mother and daughter had built a bridge that fame could never burn. A year later, the world looked very different. Across screens and cities, classrooms and companies, one name kept appearing: Bridge Lingua. The One Student project had grown into a global education platform, connecting over 50 universities on 4 continents. Children in rural Africa were learning Mandarin. Through it, teenagers in China were practicing Spanish with real peers across oceans. And every login began with the same quote on the welcome page: "Language builds bridges, and bridges make us human." Maya Thompson at Harvard's annual Global Impact Summit. Banners of Bridge Lingua fluttered across the courtyard. Maya walked toward the main hall, now in her mid, carrying herself with quiet confidence. She still wore the same necklace her mother had given her on her first day of college. A tiny silver key. The key to every door you're told you don't belong behind. Her mother had said today, that key didn't just open doors, it opened minds. Inside, hundreds of students and executives waited for her keynote. Cameras flashed, but Maya stayed calm, grounded. Angela sat in the front row again, wearing a simple navy dress. No longer a cleaner, Harvard had offered her a full-time administrative position after Bridge Lingua partnered with the university. When Maya stepped on stage, the applause rose like a wave. She smiled. "A year ago, I stood on a very different stage. I was nervous, afraid, and unsure if my voice even mattered. But what I learned is this: power doesn't come from volume, it comes from values." She paused, scanning the audience. Every one of us speaks a different language: English, Mandarin, Spanish, code, art, compassion. And when we stop judging who's speaking and start listening to what's being said, that's when the world begins to change. The audience was silent, listening. Really listening. Halfway across the hall, a man watched quietly. Thomas Whitmore, no longer a millionaire mogul, just a mentor now, volunteering with Bridge Lingua's outreach program. When the applause thundered again, he didn't stand for recognition. He just smiled. The humble smile of a man who had learned that silence, used right, could build peace instead of power. After the ceremony, Maya found him by the exit doors, helping a student adjust his presentation slides. "Still teaching?" she teased. He chuckled. "Still learning." They shared a knowing smile. "I never thanked you," he said softly. "Not for forgiving me, for proving me wrong." Maya shook her head. "You proved yourself right. Everyone can change, Mr. Whitmore. Some just need to lose their stage before they find their voice." He laughed quietly. "And you've built a stage big enough for the whole world." Later that evening, Maya and Angela stood outside the hall, watching the sunset spill over the Charles River. Boats drifted by, the water glinting gold. Angela exhaled. "Remember that night you almost quit? The one after he mocked you?" Maya smiled. "You told me truth echoes longer than lies." "And it did," Angela said softly. "It echoed all the way here." They stood in silence for a moment. A silence full of everything words couldn't hold. struggle, pride, and peace. Then Angela slipped the silver key from her neck and placed it in Maya's hand. You don't need it anymore, baby. You are the key now. Tears welled in Maya's eyes. She hugged her mother tightly, the city glowing around them. A week later, Bridgelingua launched its newest initiative, the Whitmore Scholarship for Cultural Understanding, fully funded by anonymous donors. It supported marginalized students in global communication fields. Only a few people knew who the donor really was. Thomas never told anyone. He didn't need credit, just closure. Months rolled by. In classrooms from Boston to Beijing, teachers used Bridgelingua's programs. Students shared stories through live translation chats, laughter crossing languages, compassion crossing oceans. One clip went viral. A Chinese student and a Nigerian student laughing together as the app perfectly translated their jokes in real time. Underneath, Maya commented simply, "This is the sound of change." That night, back in her quiet apartment overlooking the Charles, Maya sat at her desk, finishing an email draft to her board. Her laptop wallpaper was a photo of her mother, beaming at the first award ceremony. She paused, thinking, then she whispered the words that had guided her all along. Respect doesn't start in boardrooms. It starts in hearts. She hit send. Outside, the river shimmered, and somewhere in the distance, the bells of Harvard chimed a soft reminder that history had already changed its tune.